Hi, I'm Alan Rusbridger, editor of Prospect Magazine, and you're about to watch the interview portion of the latest episode of Media Confidential with myself and Lionel Barber, in which we speak to a special guest. If you want to watch the full episode, please click on the link below, and if you want to subscribe to Prospect Magazine, please visit our website at www.prospectmagazine, all one word, .co.uk. Enjoy.
Bob, it's great to have you on Media Confidential. You are obviously best known as an author on American foreign policy. You've written a number of very successful books, but you also occupied, until very recently, this position of editor-at-large at the Washington Post. And you decided, having seen this decision by the Post not to endorse a candidate in the 2024 campaign, to resign. Why did this matter so much to you, and why does it matter in general?
Well, it as soon as I saw it, I was shocked, but I understood what it meant. 11 days before the election, it was very clear to me that this was an attempt, and is an attempt, by Jeff Bezos to try to curry favor with what he may guess is a likely Trump presidency. Because his experience in dealing with Donald Trump in Trump's first term was that Trump was going after him tooth and nail. He believes that he was denied very important government contracts by Trump as punishment for stories that were written, or editorials in some cases that were written by the Washington Post. We know, it's just logical. Amazon is a $2 trillion business. Blue Origin, his aerospace company, is his passion. I think it may mean more to him than anything else. And unfortunately, the Washington Post comes in third in that, at least maybe third in that list. And so he has clearly been forced for I think very clear and rational business reasons to sacrifice the integrity of the Post in order to maintain hope of not being severely punished should Trump be elected.
And when you read Sir William Lewis's editorial explaining the rationale behind the decision and saying this was an attempt to regain or retain a degree of independence on part of the Post, what did you make of that?
Well, under the circumstances, that's a pretty Orwellian type of a statement, since it's clear that independence is exactly what is not what is not being achieved here. Look, as I've said, it's a very interesting theoretical question as to whether newspapers should endorse presidents. I'm interested in the question. Maybe the Columbia Journalism Review can do a nice study on that question. But that is 11 days before the election is not the time to raise that question and to make a decision on that basis. And look, we're not, I hope we're not children. We can see what the real motives were here. And I think it's interesting. I think Bezos was in some respects clever to turn this into basically, a conversation about the media. Because, of course, as we know, the media is extremely insecure. They know the public doesn't really trust them, et cetera, et cetera. So he went straight to the heart of the media's insecurity. And so we're having a lot of discussions now about the poor media. I really think in the present circumstances, the question is actually about democracy and individual rights and the free press in America. And I don't blame Bezos and Will Lewis for wanting to change the subject from that, but that's what's at stake here. That's what Bezos has done. And as I say, these other theoretical questions are interesting, but that is not what this decision was about.
That's an interesting point, Bob, isn't it? Because Bezos' own piece talked about low levels of trust in the media, and I think he's right to say that people are worried about the media being biased. But can you just talk a bit about to what extent a newspaper endorsement, where the evidence is that actually taints the source in people's minds?
Well, I don't think it really necessarily does. Now, it's true that many people don't know that the editorial page and the news gathering parts of a newspaper are separate, but they should. I mean, it's pretty obvious. Certainly, the news industry knows it. The Wall Street Journal is like the Washington Post. It has an editorial page with an opinion. In this case, it's a pro-Trump opinion. But the news gathering of the Wall Street Journal, I think everybody accepts is unbiased. Now, when people don't like stories, they think it's a matter of bias. We all know that. I don't like that story, and therefore I don't like what that story is saying, so therefore it's a matter of bias. And by the way, reporters have biases, etc. But I think that, again, these are interesting theoretical conversations if that's what this were about. But that is not what this is about. And I hate to have us chasing this red herring. Not that I'm perfectly happy to have this conversation with you. It's a media show, etc. But I hate to spend a lot of time on the red herring that Bezos and Will Lewis deliberately threw out there so that we would spend at least some of our time talking about this and not about the meeting that Blue Origin held with Donald Trump on the very afternoon of this announcement.
Well, let's come in on that, Bob, because one of the obvious aspects of this campaign, and as it goes into the finale, has been the alliance between Elon Musk and Donald Trump. It may be one of convenience, but it's pretty clear that Musk is in the rocket business, and so is Jeff Bezos. Do you think that was part of the thinking here?
Yes. There's quite a...
I hate to put words into your mouth, Bob.
No. Well, that was, you can do that one. There is actually quite, and to their credit, by the way, the Washington Post journalists have not stopped, whatever censorship may exist in the future is not happening today. So there is a very, very long, well-reported story in the Washington Post today which actually addresses your question very directly, which is exactly that. Bezos is obsessed with the fact, according to this Washington Post story, that Musk is getting all these contracts. We're having a dispute as to whether we want to fly to Mars or fly to the moon. If you want to fly to the moon, you go with Jeff Bezos. If you want to fly with Mars, you go with Musk, But that, I think, as I said, people who know Bezos, I don't, but people who know Bezos say that this space stuff is what really motivates him. He wants to be part of the space program. He relies, obviously, on government contracts, of which Musk is clearly getting the lion's share up until now. And given Musk's relationship with Trump, which is two peas in a pod, I don't blame Bezos from a business point of view being very worried that his space company is going to suffer in a Trump administration. And clearly, as we used to say, it's no accident, comrades, that the meeting that was held that day was not with the Amazon CEO. It was with the Blue Origin CEO.
You're one of a small number of staff who resigned on principle over this. 250,000 subscribers, if we're to believe the Washington Post's own reporting, have also resigned on principle. What do you think about the publisher's role in this? Will Lewis, he's been a controversial figure since he turned up at the Post, but do you think he should have quit?
I mean, look, he's part of Bezos' solution. He's not part of Bezos' problem. He clearly was brought in, I think, and again, I'm speculating here. I don't know what people are thinking. I don't know about conversations between Bezos and Lewis, but it seems to me, I'm willing to speculate, that he was brought in to reorient the general tenor of the Washington Post and maybe make it a little bit more like the Wall Street Journal. By the way, you could do that as a successful business model, too. You could say that center-right is a better position to hold in modern America than distinctly liberal, which I think is what the Washington Post has been. And so I wouldn't be surprised if Bezos, through Lewis, is hoping gradually, I think he was hoping the word would have been gradually, transform the Post into a slightly more centrist publication that would not alienate people, as well as potentially the next president of the United States. So I don't think if you're Bezos, Will Lewis is not the one who needs to resign. But if you're the Washington Post editorial staff, if you're the news gatherers of the Washington Post, then they can answer that question. But I put it this way. I would be surprised if Will Lewis is the one who winds up resigning in all of this. Now, on the other hand, I think he's raised difficulties for himself because I think some of his statements And now Bezos is. I think there are some contradictions in there, but I'll leave it to the journalists to dig out those contradictions.
When you think about the prospect of a second term for Donald Trump, how worried should the American media be?
The American media should be very worried, especially if they are owned by large corporate conglomerates that have much vaster interests than the particular media organization that they also happen to own. And that's certainly true. That was true, obviously, of the LA Times. It's true, clearly, of the Washington Post, but it's also true of, I believe, most of the major TV outlets. They're all part of large conglomerates who have broad interests in the American economy, which can be affected by a hostile federal government and a hostile president. And so,
The worst,
I'm
what's the
sorry,
worst he can do?
get major organizations to be sure that they don't say anything to offend him,
I,
like on
by
a systematic basis? Is that a problem? It feels like a problem.
by threatening contracts, by threatening licenses, that kind of thing?
By threatening licenses and by threatening corporate interests that are associated to those media organizations. I mean, look what happened on that Friday, last Friday. That was, by the way, that Blue. I'm sorry to keep going back to Blue Origin, but I think it's just so instructive that it's worth digging into a little bit. By the way, that wasn't a meeting. That was a handshake. They didn't set up a real meeting after his rally in Texas. And what I see that as is it was a ring kissing, a public ring kissing. And I really think that meeting was Donald Trump's way of rather explicitly signaling to everyone this is how business is going to work in this second term. You will demonstrate obeisance to me, in which case I will forbear, perhaps, from punishing you for your bad acts. And by the way, this isn't just media organizations that are engaged in this, not in the case of the Washington Post. When Jamie Dimon made his sort of friendly, praising comments of Donald Trump back in January at Davos, that was the same thing. That was Jamie Dimon saying, hey, you're not going to have any trouble out of me. Don't worry about it. I'm good. I also think it was Jamie Dimon saying to his stockholders, don't worry, we're not going to be punished by Donald Trump. So, don't think that a Donald Trump victory is bad for our corporate interests.
And that's Jamie Dimon, who is the chairman and chief executive of JP Morgan Chase, probably the most powerful banker on Wall Street.
Right. And back in January, he said that Donald Trump was probably right about, and it was an interesting list of issues, immigration. Really? Is Donald Trump right about immigration? Also, NATO, he said. And I think that, I read that in the same way that I read Bezos's decision this past Friday. And look, there are articles in the news all over the place, including in the Washington Post, about how many corporations are now scrambling to try to get on the good side of Donald Trump. And by the way, it's an interesting phenomenon here. People like Jeff Bezos know that if they pull this maneuver now 11 days before the election, they will probably not be punished should Kamala Harris win. Because I don't think anybody thinks the Harris administration is like Donald Trump, whatever other virtues or lack of virtues it may have. And so he knows that he can risk this without a great deal of risk if Harris wins, but he knows with certainty that if he doesn't do this, he will be punished by Donald Trump. So, if you're just making business decisions, and I think this is a business decision, it's the right business decision. I've been saying lately, capitalism may depend on liberalism, but capitalists don't. Capitalists can thrive in a liberal society. They can thrive in a dictatorship. They can thrive, as long as they're getting along with the ruler, whoever that ruler may be, they're fine. And so I think I'm sorry, I think that's what we're seeing here across the board in the United States.
Final question from me, Bob. Do you think this is a temporary problem in the Washington Post? How long-lasting will this be? Is this a sort of defining thing for the Washington Post for our generation? Or will it soon be forgotten?
Well, we face such radically different futures depending on this vote on Tuesday that I hesitate to answer questions like that. If Harris wins and the world sort of, we're not threatened anymore by a Donald Trump, then I'm going to imagine that, well, I don't know what Jeff Bezos is going to do, but I would imagine the Post can sort of go back to being the Washington Post. But if Donald Trump wins, I think that this is just the beginning, and that's why I feel for those who are still staying at the Post. I understand their decision, and I respect it, especially the way they're behaving right now. But if the goal of this was to avoid offending Donald Trump before the election, imagine when Donald Trump is president. Do we really think that Bezos is going to run a newspaper that is attacking and vilifying the president of the United States every single day? I think it bodes ill in the near future, even for those who want to be independent voices at the Washington Post, should Donald Trump win. And that's what this decision means. And that's why I resigned, because you can see the writing on the wall. It's not really that difficult to see where a decision like this goes. This is not the last thing that Jeff Bezos is going to do if Donald Trump wins. It's the first thing.
Bob, you've said, I'm not going to interrupt you on that last word. That's the great way to sign off. Thank you very much for speaking with us. I'm keeping my fingers crossed. Certainly, everybody's asking me what's going to happen. I said, I have no idea.
Well, I have no idea.
Just hoping. It's hoping for the best and preparing for the worst, as they say in the States.
Exactly.
Okay.
Thank you.